What if there existed, deep beneath our feet, a path that wasn't just dug by Earth, but for the memory of humanity itself? If you feel like certain things don't are coincidence, maybe this video is what you needed to hear. Because throughout the millennia, as the world built empires on the surface, another silent trail was left underground, an invisible, almost spiritual trace, as if human history had kept its deepest secrets where the light does not reach. Imagine for a moment the darkness of a tunnel that no one has stepped into for thousands of years. Oh, still air, absolute silence, the echo of footsteps that no longer belong to any body alive. There, in this space between stone and shadow, the past still breathes, not as a cold archaeological record but like a whisper, as if each hallway were a file emotional, preserving fears, exiles, rituals, escapes, and rebirths. It's curious, always, that humanity was on the verge of collapse. It dug down, as if the soul itself knew that. Beneath the surface there is a second world, a world that supports, hides, transforms. Science calls it engineering. Spirituality calls it ancestral memory. But maybe be two sides of the same truth. Because every tunnel revealed, every cave unearthed, each rediscovered gallery reminds us of something we insist on forgetting. When the body seeks shelter, the soul seeks meaning. And the underground has always been a mirror of this movement. Today, you and I will go down together. Not as archaeologists, but as travelers spiritual. Let's follow the traces left by those who walked before us, going through centuries of silence until finding that which remains. After all, what if what is hidden beneath the earth is just a reflection of what is hidden inside us? There is a moment when we enter the first tunnel buried by time, when the mind tries to explain, but the heart just feels. And it is precisely in this interval, between explanation and feeling, that the subterranean mysteries begin to speak. Because every corridor, each carved wall, each displaced stone holds a human intention that went through centuries without losing his own voice. This is the part that modern archaeology is still trying to understand. Why civilizations so far apart, separated by oceans and ages, made the same silent decision to dig down, not to fetch water, not for extracting metal, but to create entire worlds beneath the earth, as if this descent was a call inscribed in the human instinct itself. The first evidence of this appears scattered, almost timid, as if history wanted to test our curiosity before revealing everything. Narrow tunnels, drowned steps in dust, passages that curve into spirals that human logic would not attempt build today. And yet, someone tried, someone insisted. Did anyone believe that, below from the surface, there was something more than simple shelter? And the more you discover, the more it becomes clear that these structures were not improvised. They were not just responses to fear. They were projects with purpose, and a purpose that seems bigger than what's survival. The strange precision of the walls reveals this. Tool marks show repetition, rhythm, intention. It's as if ancient hands were working, packed with knowledge which was not lost by accident but by choice. Many of these galleries cross layers of rock that even today would require technology, calculation, and planning. Some stretch for kilometers, others form closed circuits, spirals, labyrinths. There is no obvious practical reason for this, but there is a symbolic reason. And when we started to understanding this symbolism, everything takes on a different color, because each tunnel is also, silently, a mirror, a reflection of one's own being human trying to understand what he cannot name. Descending has been, for millennia, a spiritual gesture. It is admitting that there is an internal territory still untouched, waiting to be found. Ancient cultures knew this. For them, the underground was not just darkness. It was pregnancy. It was transformation. It was the symbolic womb of a world that he needed to die on top of the earth to be reborn beneath it. Science tries to explain this global repetition as cultural coincidence or convergence functional. But spirituality looks at the same phenomenon and sees an ancestral pattern, a memory, something that is repeated because it is not just about architecture, it is about meaning, and perhaps spiritual survival. When the external world collapsed, the civilization sought the interior. When chaos took the surface, the silence of the underground offered order. When fear grew, the earth offered a womb of stone where the spirit could rest. As we descend these ancient corridors, a strange feeling takes hold. It's not fear. It's not disorientation. It's as if we were entering a place that we met without ever be visited, as if the body's memory recognized the path before the mind. And perhaps this is what so many ancient civilizations sought, a return, a way to remember what life on the surface made us forget. Because deep down, every old tunnel holds a question that crosses the stone, time, and dust, a question that reaches us intact. What exactly were civilizations trying to protect or awaken? When did they decide to descend into the darkness? There are places in the world where the earth itself seems to carry a secret so ancient that, entering, you feel as if you are invading sacred territory. Among them all, none echo as deep as Derinkuyu, the Anatolian underground city, a living labyrinth that keeps the trail of thousands of forgotten steps. There, where the air still retains its weight of stories that were not told, human beings left a silent testimony of your ability to disappear from the world without ever really leaving. And when, as we cross the first narrow corridor, we immediately understand we are not facing an improvised shelter. We are facing a collective, almost spiritual decision to descend into the earth like someone descending into themselves. It is impossible to walk through Derinkuyu without feeling that each wall carries an intention that goes beyond common logic. Vents measuring tens of meters, rooms level with precision, corridors that narrow on purpose, meeting chambers, warehouses, stables, wells, and even places that many archaeologists suspect were used for rituals. And all of this was excavated to such extreme depths that even modern technology admits the challenge of replicating such a feat with simple tools. It's an exaggeration to say that Derinkuyu doesn't just look constructed, seems designed. How if was the materialization of a collective consciousness that knew how to shape the stone to reflect its own fragility, and at the same time its strength. When walking through its passages, you can't help but imagine the people who lived there. Entire families, children who ran through corridors where no light reached, elders who carried with them stories of wars, migrations, omens, fears, and hopes. People who, faced with the instability of the outside world, chose a path that few would have the courage to follow, disappearing from the surface. But this decision does not sound like an escape. Sounds like strategy. Sounds like protection. Sounds perhaps like a call that has resonated since long before the first stone was touched. And this is where science and spirituality meet once again. Through the scientific lens, Derinkuyu is a marvel of ancient engineering, a testament to human need to survive invasions, persecutions, and disasters. But through the spiritual lens, it becomes something else, a womb of stone, a symbolic crossing, a portal between vulnerability and resilience. Because living in darkness isn't just about hiding, it's about reinventing yourself. It is discover that inner light does not depend on the sun. It is understanding that darkness, when welcomed, it reveals secrets that the surface could never offer. And when we think about it, something curious happens. The narrative is no longer just historical and becomes deeply human. Because in a way, we have all built our own internal tunnels. We have all looked for metaphorical caves where the world couldn't hurt us. We have all gone down inside ourselves looking for answers that life on the surface seemed incapable of offering. Derinkuyu is not just archaeological remains, is a mirror of our ancestral instinct to go through crises, transforming fear into depth, silence into protection, stone into shelter. But there is still a detail that intrigues scholars to this day. Derinkuyu's interconnection with other underground cities in the region. Tunnels that seem to stretch for miles, perhaps connecting communities that had never seen each other, but shared the same impulse to dive into the earth. It is as if there existed, rooted in the human unconscious, a universal call to depth, physical, emotional, spiritual. And then the question arises that opens the next chapter of our journey. Why did different people, separated by time and space, hear the same call to descend? And what exactly did they expect to find in the darkness? There are tunnels that were made to protect. There are tunnels that were made to hide. But there are others, rarer, that were made to transform. And it is in this third type that we find one of the most mysterious manifestations of ancient engineering. Galleries built not to house bodies but to alter consciousness. When we entered in these corridors, we immediately noticed that something different happens to the senses. The light changes, the sound expands, the air seems to vibrate, as if space itself had been designed to have an inner impact. These places were not addresses. They were portals, liminal spaces where the human encountered the invisible and everyday life became dissolved in the face of something bigger. Ancient cultures in South America, Asia, and the Mediterranean left traces of this spiritual intention. Underground temples with chambers carefully positioned to manipulate echo, darkness, and silence. Tunnels that would lead pilgrims to a state of emotional vulnerability, opening inner doors that life on the surface rarely allowed. For these people, the underground did not just represent a physical place, but a living metaphor of spiritual crossing. And when we see the way these structures were built, we realize that there was no improvisation. Every angle, every curve, every unevenness seemed calculated to create a profound, ritualistic experience. Modern archaeologists analyze the stones, the cracks, the wear patterns, and try to put together a purely technical puzzle. But ancient spirituality cannot be explained just by technique. She feels. It resonates. These tunnels were instruments, almost like musical instruments, tuned to resonate with the human soul. Some produced echoes so prolonged that a single note could reverberate for entire seconds, filling the body with a sound that seemed to come from another plane. Others created total darkness, forcing the visitor to confront the interior without distractions. And still others channeled running water under the floor, generating a serious and constant noise, capable of induced deep meditative states. All of this, absolutely everything, points to a sophisticated understanding of the effect psychological and spiritual that certain environments can provoke. Our ancestors knew that human beings change when they go through silence. Did you know that darkness can reveal more than hiding? They knew that the internal world, when touched, awakens memories that the external world insists on burying. And perhaps that's why these tunnels continue to fascinate us, because they remind us of something we have forgotten. Transformation. It doesn't start at the surface. It always starts within. When observing these spaces, we also realized that there was a symbolic intention powerful. To go down was to abandon the old. Walking underground was like crossing a psychological threshold, and to emerge again was to be reborn. This cycle appears in dozens of cultures, as if all of humanity shared the same archetype. The archetype of the descent into the interior as a path of revelation. Jung would call this diving into the unconscious. Shamans would call it a journey to the underworld. Mystics would call passing through the belly of the earth. Different names, but the same essential experience. And this is where the narrative becomes even more intriguing. People who have never met built tunnels with similar functions, similar effects, and symbolisms similar, not by coincidence but by recognition. They seem to understand that, beneath the surface, there is a universal road, a road that leads not to the past, but at the center of ourselves. And that brings us to the inevitable question: if so many cultures created tunnels to transform the spirit, what exactly did they do? Did they hope to awaken within those who dared to cross the darkness? As we advance through the corridors of ancient civilizations, a feeling dawns on us, intensifies. We haven't seen everything yet, because behind the revealed galleries there are others which remain closed. Sealed tunnels, stone doors that were never opened, chambers that science knows exist, but that no one has entered. And it is at this point that the history stops, being just discovered, and begins to become silence. A thick silence, almost uncomfortable, as if something was deliberately waiting not to be found. And this leads us to a deeper question. Why do certain paths underground were sealed? What was there that needed to be hidden or preserved from future eyes? Modern technology has already proven that the underground holds more than we imagined. Radar wave scans, muon particle scans, soundings carried out under pyramids and temples revealed empty spaces, impossible geometries, chambers that have never been touched since the moment they were closed. But when, instead of rushing to open them, as we would with any other archaeological mystery, something unexpected happens. Hesitation, permissions denied, projects interrupted, shipments blocked without clear explanations. It's almost as if there was a pact silent to keep certain regions asleep. And when history decides to sleep, there's usually a reason. Some claim that this caution is just asset protection. Others believe that certain civilizations left instructions so that certain spaces would never be disturbed. But there is still a third hypothesis, more subtle and deeply human. Perhaps we fear what we will find, because the underground doesn't just reveal architecture, reveal intent, reveal deep beliefs. They reveal choices, and reveal what the past decided to keep from the surface, secrets that do not fit into the straight lines of the story we tell ourselves. If something inside you is awakening, stay until the end. The answer may be here. Among the most impressive discoveries of the modern era are tunnels whose walls were lined with glowing minerals, corridors that simulated stars, chambers that seemed to reproduce an inverted sky, rivers of symbolic substances, ritualistic deposits and platforms whose function is not paralleled on the surface. These details remind us that the underground was not a place of improvisation. It was a sacred space, a zone of transition built into experiences that were perhaps considered too dangerous, too powerful, or too deep to happen outdoors. What if the underground were used not just for physical protection, but for spiritual? If certain practices, knowledge, or states of consciousness could only occur inside the stone, where the outside world could not interfere? This would explain why so many entrances were closed, why some routes were deleted from maps, why certain corridors seem to have been urgently sealed, and perhaps too because that many of these tunnels remain unexplored to this day. Science tries to illuminate the darkness with technology. Spirituality tries to illuminate it with meaning, but they both reach the same point. There are hidden regions in human history that we still don't dare cross, and this fact, instead of being an obstacle, is an invitation, because where there is silence, there is potential. Where there is emptiness, there is message. Where there is darkness, there is revelation. And so we get closer to the big question that awaits ahead. If the underground holds secrets not yet revealed by science, what part of our own story remains hidden below the surface, waiting for the right time to emerge? As we descend deeper into this journey, something begins to emerge that goes beyond the archaeology, beyond engineering, beyond documented history. It's as if, under every layer of rock, another human layer revealed itself, a part of us that we access in the superficial and fast-paced life in which we live. Because tunnels are not only physical constructions, they are living metaphors. They are extensions of what we carry inside. And therefore, the more we study the underground of humanity, the more we realize that we are also studying the underground of the soul. We all have internal spaces that we prefer to keep closed, memories that we buried, wounds that we leave in the dark, waiting for time to resolve, silences, so as old as the caves we pass through. And perhaps that is the reason why so many different civilizations in different eras decided to dig down, because they intuited that depth reveals what the surface tries to hide. The collective unconscious, how Jung described, it is exactly that, a shared underground field, a space symbolic where experiences that transcend cultures and eras accumulate. And when we look at tunnels built thousands of years ago, we realize that they are more than human works. They are physical manifestations of this field. Think for a moment about the emotional impact of walking into darkness. It's not natural. It goes against the primal instinct to seek security and light. But paradoxically, it also awakens a rare kind of courage, the courage to confront the unknown. The ancient cultures seem to understand that certain transformations only happen when we give up control, when we accept descending towards silence, when we allow the darkness to show us what we try to forget. That's why your galleries were long, narrow, tortuous. They were not paths made for comfort, were paths made to awaken. And this awakening was not individual. It was collective. When walking through a sacred tunnel, the entire community participated in the same emotional rite. Men, women, children, elders, everyone walked through the same corridor, breathed the same cold air, heard the same echo, faced the same discomfort. And in this sharing, something emerged that today, we hardly know it anymore. The experience of collective transformation, to learn to feel together, to recognize the other in their own darkness. This is perhaps the deepest lesson of the underground. Everything that was hidden, one day, wants to be found. Everything that has been repressed whispers for attention. Everything that was buried remains alive. Not because we cannot forget, but because the soul cannot allow the internal story to remain incomplete. She always seeks the light, always seeks resignification, always looking for feedback. And when we think about it, we start to realize that tunnels are actually bridges. They connect past and present, surface and depth, reason and emotion, connect what we are with what we still don't understand them in ourselves. And maybe because therefore so many myths, legends, and traditions speak of the descent as a fundamental part of the spiritual process. Before ascending, you must descend. Before finding light, one must enter into silence. Before transforming, you have to allow something inside to be touched. And this brings us to an essential point. Every old tunnel holds an invitation. Don't stop understand it technically, but to feel it, to enter one's own emotional underground and find that which remains asking to be listened to. And so the question arises that accompanies us to the next step. Could it be that, by exploring the tunnels of humanity, we are merely reflecting the search for something that we lost within ourselves, and that is now trying finally to return to surface? When we piece together all the tracks left in the depths of the earth, escape tunnels, entire hidden cities, ritual corridors, sealed chambers, passages designed to alter consciousness, something begins to emerge like a golden thread stitching together history human, a pattern, an intention, a silent truth. And this truth, when observed carefully, it reveals that the underground was never just a place to hang out, hide. It has always been a spiritual mirror, a symbolic territory where civilizations they projected what they feared most, and also what they sought most, as if each tunnel was a prayer carved in the darkness, a request for protection, transformation, and rebirth. Humanity has always lived between two worlds, the one above, luminous, dynamic, unpredictable, and the one below, silent, deep, unchanging. It is in this tension that our story builds. On the surface, we create cities, conflicts, advances, discoveries, downfalls. No underground. We leave marks of our vulnerabilities, our rituals, our secrets, of our questions that we still didn't know how to put into words. And when we look at these structures with an attentive heart, we realize that what is underneath of the earth is, paradoxically, what most reveals who we are on the surface. It's curious how, over the centuries, we repeat the same emotional movement. When the external world threatens to collapse, we return inside. When life demands more than we can give, we seek depth. When the soul asks for a new beginning, we come down to ground zero, whether in a tunnel, in a cave, in ritual silence, or in introspection, deep. Descent always precedes rebirth. This is not just history, it is psychology, it's spirituality, it's emotional biology. Just like the seed needs disappear in the dark to break the shell, the human being needs to cross his own night to find light again. Maybe that's why these tunnels touch us so much, because they don't just talk about who we were, they talk about who we are now. Each narrow corridor reminds us of our insecurities. Each deep room is reminiscent of the inner spaces we avoid visiting. Each sealed door remembers the chapters we prefer not to open. And at the same time, every well of ventilation, each minimal opening to the upper world, reminds us of our resistance to seeking air, seeking meaning, seeking rebirth, even when everything seems dark. Oh, underground is not an end, it's a crossing. And when we put all these images together, daring kuyu, ritual passages, caves forgotten, chambers that no one has touched, tunnels that stretch like nerves in a global memory, we realize that humanity has always sought the same thing, a reconnection point, a place where it was possible to remember who we are away from the noise of the surface. Maybe that's why these constructions echo so much, because, even disconnected for thousands of years, we share the same ancestral drive to listen to what is hidden. And now, as we climb the last symbolic ramp before the final block, a reflection arises, imposes. All these underground traces are not just external stories. They are maps internal, emotional guides, mirrors of the soul. It doesn't matter where we live, what culture we came, or how long it has been. The truth is that each of us carries within us a tunnel that has not yet been traversed, a door that has not yet opened, a depth that has not yet did not dare to visit. And it is in this, Recognition that the path begins to change direction. Because after understanding the descent comes the moment of ascension. After the darkness comes the light. After silence comes revelation. And that is exactly what the final block invites us to experiment. The question that now opens before us is simple but decisive. We're ready to emerge and see what the underground journey has awakened inside from us. We have reached the point where the underground journey stops being just a path and becomes mirror. Here, on the silent edge between what we were and what we're about to become, something inside us breathes differently, as if every step through the darkness had prepared the ground for a kind of light that is not born in the eyes, but in consciousness. It's in this moment we understand that nothing we saw beneath the earth remained really there. Everything rose with us, silent and alive. Ancient stones guarded our own reflections, and the tunnels only revealed depths that had always been waiting for name. Perhaps this is what our ancestors tried to teach us without words. Before emerge into a new world, we need to reconcile the world we carry inside. And when we finally rise, when we break the limit between shadow and surface, we realize that we are no longer the same. There is a kind of renewed silence, a clarity that comes not from reason, but from passage. Something was put back in the right place, something reorganized in the invisible, something finally woke up. And maybe that's the true revelation of the tunnels. They don't hold answers, they keep paths. Paths we keep following even after we leave the darkness backwards, because the surface is never the same for those who have already known the silence that exists beneath it. And life, in some mysterious way, starts to move with more purpose, more listening, more rooting. Now, as we emerge, we leave behind the old weight, and we take with us only what can flourish. And on the edge of this silent rebirth, I leave a subtle invitation. If this journey has touched something in you, sign up and follow us. After all, every ascension is born from a descent, and every descent holds a secret that only reveals itself when we are ready to listen.